The wedding dress felt like a noose. Calla Whitmore stood shivering in the snow outside Blackthorn Lodge, knowing the man waiting inside had buried his last wife under mysterious circumstances. Or so the whispers claimed. Behind her, two brothers who'd starve without this devil's bargain. Ahead, a door that might never open from the inside. When Ronan Vexley finally appeared, towering and scarred, the entire frontier held its breath. But before we see what happened next, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The blizzard that killed Thomas Whitmore didn't have the decency to return his body until spring. Calla found out her father was dead when Sheriff Drummond rode up 3 days after the storm, leading a horse with something wrapped in canvas tied across its back. She'd been chopping firewood behind the trading post, her hands already raw and bleeding through her gloves because the winter of 1871 had come early and mean to Montana Territory. Her 2 younger brothers were inside, rationing the last of the dried beans. She knew what the canvas meant before Drummond even dismounted. "Found him 5 miles up the northern pass," the sheriff said, not meeting her eyes. "Looks like he tried to make it to the McGregor place when the storm hit. Horse broke a leg in a drift. Your father, he didn't last long in that cold." Calla set down the axe. Her hands didn't shake. Couldn't afford to let them. "How long do I have?" she asked. Drummond finally looked at her. "What?" "Before they come for the post. Father borrowed against it last year to buy stock. I know he did. So how long before whoever holds that debt shows up to collect?" The sheriff's face told her everything. "Week, maybe 2, if the passes stay snowed in." "Who holds it?" "Calla?" "Who?" Drummond sighed, pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Syndicate out of Helena. They've been buying up every failed claim and trading post from here to the border. Your father owed them $900. They'll take the land, the buildings, the inventory, everything." "Mapam motichmapatsoki. $900. Might as well have been 9,000. The trading post barely cleared $50 in a good month, and winter wasn't a good month." Calla's mind raced through options that didn't exist. She was 22 years old with 2 brothers to feed. Daniel was 14, Marcus only 11, and the closest family was an aunt and saint, Louis, who'd made it clear in her last letter that charity didn't extend to orphaned relations she'd never met. "There's one other thing," Drummond said quietly. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Man came through last week asking about your father's situation. Said he might be willing to clear the debt." Something in his tone made Calla's skin prickle. "What man?" "Ronan Vexley." The name landed like a stone in dark water. Everyone in Montana Territory knew about Ronan Vexley, the reclusive alpha who'd built Blackthorn Lodge high up on Iron Wolf Ridge after whatever happened with his first pack. Stories varied on the details, but they all agreed on the blood. Some said he'd killed them himself in a rage. Others claimed a rival pack had slaughtered them while Ronan was away, and he'd returned to find nothing but bodies in the snow. A few whispered about the woman who'd been promised to him, who'd fled before the wedding when she learned what he really was. What everyone agreed on, Ronan Vexley was dangerous. The kind of dangerous you cross the street to avoid. The kind who made hard men nervous. "Why would he offer that?" Calla asked. Drummond shifted his weight. "He didn't say, but word is he's looking for a wife." The implications hit her like a physical blow. "No." "Calla, I said no." She turned back to the woodpile, grabbed the axe, brought it down hard enough to split the log clean through. "I'll find another way." "There isn't another way." Drummond's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. "I'm sorry. I truly am. But unless you can produce $900 in the next 2 weeks, that syndicate's going to take everything. You and your brothers will be on the street in the dead of winter with nowhere to go." "Then we'll go somewhere. We'll manage." "How? Doing what?" He wasn't being cruel, just honest. "You think any of the settlements around here are hiring in January? You think you can walk to the next town with 2 boys through snow that's already hip deep?" Calla swung the axe again. And again, each impact jarring up through her shoulders. "Vexley's offer stands until the end of the week," Drummond said. After that, he's riding back up to Iron Wolf Ridge. You want to talk to him? He's staying at the boarding house in town." He left the paper on the chopping block and rode away. Calla stood there until her arms gave out, until she couldn't lift the axe anymore. Then she went inside to where Daniel was trying to teach Marcus his letters by the failing light of their last good candle. They both looked up when she entered, looked at her face. "How bad?" Daniel asked. He was too young to sound that old. "Bad," Calla admitted. She couldn't lie to them. "Father borrowed money. They're going to take the post." Marcus's eyes went huge. "Where will we go?" "I don't know yet." She forced herself to smile. "But we'll figure something out. We always do." Later, after both boys were asleep, she sat by the dying fire and stared at Drummond's paper until the words stopped making sense. The syndicate's terms were brutal in their simplicity. $900 by February 1st, or full forfeiture of all property and assets. No extensions. No negotiation. She'd spent 3 years helping her father run this post, knew every inch of it, every supplier, every trader who passed through, knew exactly how impossible it would be to raise that kind of money in 2 weeks. The wind howled outside, rattling the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled back. Daniel found her there at dawn, still in the same chair. "You didn't sleep," he said. "Neither did you." He shrugged, 13 going on 30. "Heard you pacing. You always pace when you're trying to solve something. Some things don't have solutions. This one does." Daniel pulled up a stool, sat down. "You're thinking about what the sheriff said. About Vexley." Calla's head snapped up. "You were listening." "These walls are thin. Calla, if he can clear the debt, no, absolutely not." "Why not? Because of stories? Because people are scared of him?" Daniel's jaw set in that stubborn way that meant he'd thought this through. "I'm scared of freezing to death. I'm scared of watching Marcus starve. If Vexley's offering a way out..." "You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. Explain why dying in the cold is better than..." "Because I won't sell myself to some monster just to..." Calla stopped, took a breath. "This isn't your decision to make. It is if I'm old enough to die from it." Daniel stood. "I'm going into town. Coming with me? Or should I talk to Vexley myself?" Which was how Calla Whitmore ended up walking into the Iron Creek boarding house on a January morning so cold her breath froze in the air, looking for the most feared man in Montana territory. The boarding house keeper, Mrs. Chen, took one look at her face and pointed upstairs without a word. "Room 7, end of the hall." Calla climbed the stairs feeling like she was walking to her own execution. Her hand shook when she raised it to knock. "It's open," came a voice from inside. Deep, rough as gravel. She opened the door. Ronan Vexley stood by the window, backlit by weak winter sun. Tall, taller than her father had been, broader through the shoulders. Dark hair pulled back from a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so hard. But it was the scars that caught her attention. They started at his collar and disappeared beneath his shirt, like something with claws had tried to peel him open. He didn't turn around. "Sheriff told you." "He told me you made an offer." Calla forced herself to stay in the doorway, hand still on the knob. "Escape route. I want to hear it from you. I'll clear your father's debt. All of it. The trading post stays in your name, your brothers stay fed and housed." He still wasn't looking at her. "In exchange, you marry me and come to Blackthorn Lodge." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Why would you do that?" "Because I need a wife." "Then marry someone who actually wants to be married. Helena's full of women looking for husbands." Now he did turn. His eyes were pale gray, like winter ice. "They're looking for normal husbands. Store clerks. Ranch hands. Men who come home at night and don't make them nervous." His mouth twisted. "I make everyone nervous." "So you're buying a wife who doesn't have the option to refuse. I'm offering a business arrangement. You get security, I get..." He paused. "Company." "Company." Calla laughed, and it sounded slightly unhinged even to her own ears. "That's what you're calling it. What would you call it?" "Desperation on my part. On yours, I don't know. Control? Loneliness?" She stepped into the room properly, let the door swing shut. If she was doing this, she'd do it looking him in the eye. "I've heard the stories about you, about what happened to your first pack, about the woman who ran rather than marry you." Something flickered across his face. And? And I need to know what I'm walking into. Are you going to hurt me? No. Are you going to lock me up? Keep me from seeing my brothers? No. Then what exactly do you expect from a wife? Ronan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, like he was picking through broken glass. I expect you to live at Blackthorn Lodge, to be present when the pack gathers, to stand beside me when territorial disputes need settling. He paused. Beyond that, you can do as you please. That's it? That's it. It sounded too easy, too simple. Men like Ronan Vexley, powerful men, dangerous men, they didn't just want ornamental wives. They wanted control, submission, proof of their dominance. What about? Calla gestured vaguely, feeling her face heat. Marriage duties. What about them? I'm asking what you expect. Ronan's expression didn't change. I expect you to make your own choices. If you want separate rooms, we'll have separate rooms. If you want the door locked, you'll have the only key. I'm not buying a slave, Miss Whitmore. I'm asking for a partner in public. What happens in private is your decision. Calla stared at him. Everyone said Ronan Vexley was a monster. Everything she'd heard suggested he was brutal, possessive, exactly the kind of man who'd force himself on an unwilling wife. But standing here, looking at him, really looking, she saw something else in those cold gray eyes. Something tired, something lonely, something broken. I need 3 days, she heard herself say, to put my affairs in order, to make sure my brothers are settled. You're agreeing? I'm saying I'll give you an answer in 3 days. If I say yes, I want it in writing. The debt cleared, the trading post in my name, provisions for my brothers if anything happens to me, all of it legal and binding. For the first time, something almost like respect crossed his face. Fair enough. I'll have a lawyer draw up the contract. Calla turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. If I do this, if I agree, I want the truth. About what happened to your pack, about why you're really doing this. The truth. Ronan smiled, and it was the saddest thing she'd seen. The truth is that Blackthorn Lodge is haunted, Miss Whitmore. Not by ghosts, by memory, by silence, by rooms that echo because there's no one left to fill them. He looked back out the window. I'm tired of living in a tomb. That answer enough for you? It should have terrified her. Instead, standing there in that sparse boarding house room, watching this scarred and damaged man stare out at the frozen wilderness like he was already buried in it, Calla felt something unexpected. Recognition. She'd been living in a tomb, too. Ever since her mother died when she was 16, ever since her father started drinking himself numb, ever since she'd realized the trading post was failing and no one was coming to save them. She'd been going through the motions, surviving without living, existing in the spaces between one disaster and the next. Maybe that was the real truth. Not that Ronan Vexley was a monster, but that he was exactly as trapped as she was, just in a different kind of cage. 3 days, she repeated, and left before she could change her mind. Daniel was waiting outside, stamping his feet against the cold. Well? He offered terms. I'm thinking about it. Calla. I said I'm thinking about it. She started walking, letting her brother hurry to catch up. Don't push. But they both knew she'd already decided. Had probably decided the moment Drummond mentioned the debt. You didn't get choices when you were poor and desperate in Montana Territory in the middle of winter. You got survival. Maybe. The 3 days passed like a fever dream. Calla went through the motions. Inventory at the trading post, letters to the few remaining suppliers, final accounts. Making sure Daniel knew where everything was, how to manage if she didn't come back. He didn't ask questions, just watched her with those 2 old eyes and helped where he could. Marcus was harder. He was still young enough to believe in fairy tales, to think big sisters were invincible. Why do you have to go? He asked the night before the wedding. Calla sat on the edge of his bed, smoothing down his hair like their mother used to. Because sometimes we have to do hard things to protect the people we love. Is he really a monster? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe he's just a man who's had terrible things happen to him, and people made up stories because they don't understand. Will you come visit? Every chance I get. She kissed his forehead. And you can write to me. Tell me all about what you and Daniel are doing. Deal? Deal. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and brutally cold. Calla put on the only nice dress she owned, dark blue wool, practical rather than pretty, and borrowed a shawl from Mrs. Chen. No veil, no flowers. This wasn't that kind of wedding. The ceremony happened in the town clerk's office, witnessed by Sheriff Drummond and a lawyer whose name Calla immediately forgot. The contract was signed first, debt cleared, trading post transferred to Calla's name, trust fund established for Daniel and Marcus. All legal, all binding. Then the vows. Standard territorial marriage contract. No church, no romance, just legal words that bound two people together until death. Ronan's hands were rough when he slid the plain gold band onto her finger. He didn't try to kiss her, just nodded once, formal, like they'd completed a business transaction, which Calla supposed they had. Afterward, in the cold outside the clerk's office, Drummond pulled her aside. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. "Too late now. It's never too late. You can still walk away." Calla looked over at Ronan, who was settling accounts with the lawyer, tall and scarred and dangerous, yes, but also alone, so completely alone. "No," she said. "I can't." The ride to Iron Wolf Ridge took 4 hours through snow that got deeper with every mile. Ronan led the way on a massive black horse that looked mean enough to eat wolves. Calla followed on a borrowed mare, her few belongings tied behind the saddle. Neither of them spoke. Blackthorn Lodge appeared as they crested the final ridge. It wasn't what Calla expected, not some ramshackle cabin or brooding fortress. Instead, a sprawling timber structure that looked like it had grown out of the mountain itself. 3 stories, wide porches, smoke rising from multiple chimneys, beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. The pack came out to meet them. 15, maybe 20 people. Men and women, a few children. All watching Ronan with expressions Calla couldn't quite read. Not fear exactly, more like wariness, like they were waiting to see which version of their alpha had returned. "This is Calla," Ronan said simply. "My wife. Anyone has a problem with that, speak now." Silence. Then a tall woman with iron-gray hair stepped forward. "Welcome to Blackthorn Lodge," she said, not quite warmly, but not hostile either. "I'm Margot. I run the kitchens. You need anything? You ask." "Thank you," Calla managed. The others followed suit, introducing themselves in a blur of names and faces she'd never remember. All polite, all careful, all watching Ronan like he might detonate at any moment. He bore it with the same stiff formality he'd shown at the wedding. When the introductions finished, he gestured toward the lodge. "I'll show you to your room." The inside of Blackthorn Lodge was warmer than Calla expected. Clean, well-maintained. The main hall soared 2 stories high, with a massive stone fireplace at one end and furniture that looked handcrafted and built to last. Everything spoke of wealth, but old wealth. Established, nothing flashy or new. Ronan led her upstairs, down a long hallway to a door at the very end. "This is yours," he said, pushing it open. The room beyond was larger than the entire sleeping area in the trading post. A 4-poster bed with thick quilts. A stone fireplace already laid with wood. Windows that looked out over the whole valley. A door on the far side that led to a private bathing room. Actual running water, piped in from a hot spring. "Dinner's at 7, Ronan said. "Someone will come get you. If you need anything before then, pull that cord by the bed. Margot will send someone up." He turned to leave. "Wait," Calla said. "Where's your room?" "Far side of the hall. You want me to show you where it is?" "No, She didn't know what she wanted. To know the layout, to know where he'd be, to know if he'd lied about the separate rooms. "Thank you for this." Ronan looked at her for a long moment. "You're my wife now. That means something, even if the marriage is just paperwork. Nobody here will touch you. Nobody will harm you. You're safe." "And you?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Am I safe from you?" His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he might be angry. Then he just looked tired again. "The door locks from the inside. Keys in the top drawer. Use it if you want." He left without another word. Calla stood alone in her new room, in this strange lodge, married to a man she didn't know, and for the first time since her father died, she sat down and cried. Not from fear, not from grief, from sheer overwhelming exhaustion of holding everything together for so long. When she finally stopped, the light outside had turned gray. Evening coming on. She washed her face in the basin, changed into a simpler dress, and tried to make herself presentable. Found the key right where Ronan said it would be. Solid iron, heavy in her palm. She slipped it into her pocket but didn't lock the door. Dinner was an ordeal. The entire pack gathered in the main hall, maybe 30 people instead of the 20 she'd seen outside. Long tables, platters of food, venison, root vegetables, bread still steaming from the ovens. More food than Calla had seen in months. She sat at the head table beside Ronan, hyper-aware of every eye on her. The pack was polite but curious, asking careful questions about where she was from, how she knew their alpha. She answered with half-truths and deflections, playing the role of new bride while her stomach churned too much to eat. Ronan barely spoke, just sat there like a statue, present but not participating. Every so often, someone would ask him a question about hunting rotations or supply runs, and he'd give terse answers that shut down conversation rather than encouraging it. Margot, sitting across from them, finally broke the tension. "You'll have to forgive us," she said to Calla. "We're not used to company up here. Gets quiet on the mountain." "How long have you been at Blackthorn Lodge?" Calla asked. 15 years. Came up with my husband back when the mining was still good. He died in—" She stopped abruptly, glancing at Ronan. "Well, he died. But the pack takes care of its own, so I stayed." The table went quiet. Calla looked at Ronan, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw, saw the careful way everyone was suddenly very interested in their food. "And what?" she asked quietly. "The collapse," Margot said. 5 years ago, mine tunnel under the ridge gave way. Killed 17 people, including Ronan's brother. Would have been more, but—" She trailed off. "But what?" "But Ronan went in after them." This from a younger man down the table. Pulled out 6 survivors before the second collapse hit, nearly died himself. Calla turned to stare at her husband. He was looking at his plate, expression unreadable. "I didn't know," she said softly. "Why would you?" Ronan stood abruptly. "I'm going to check the western perimeter. Don't wait up." He left before anyone could respond. The hall stayed quiet for a moment. Then conversation slowly started again, careful and muted. Margot leaned forward. "Don't take it personally. Anniversary's in 2 weeks. Always hits him hard." "He blames himself, Calla said. "Not a question." "Shouldn't. Wasn't his fault. But try telling him that." The older woman sighed. "He was different before. Still hard, but not like this. The collapse changed him. And then when Alara left, Margot, someone warned, she should know. She's his wife now, whether it's a real marriage or not." Margot fixed Calla with a look. "Ronan was engaged before. Woman named Alara from one of the eastern packs. They were supposed to marry a month after the collapse. She took one look at him after, broken ribs, half his back torn up from falling timber, drowning in grief over his brother, and decided she didn't want to tie herself to that, left without a word." Calla's chest tightened. "That's cruel. That's survival. Can't blame her for choosing herself over a man who was barely holding together." Margot stood, started clearing plates. But it broke something in him, made him think he was too damaged for anyone to stay, so he stopped trying. After dinner, Calla wandered the lodge. No one stopped her, though a few pack members nodded as she passed. The building was massive, full of rooms and hallways that seemed to go on forever. She found a library with more books than she'd seen in her life, a workshop where someone was repairing saddles, a nursery where 2 small children were already asleep. She also found the entrance to the lower levels. A heavy door marked with warnings. Restricted. Unstable. Do not enter. The collapsed tunnels. Had to be. Calla stood there for a long time, staring at that door, wondering what Ronan saw when he looked at it, wondering how you lived in a place that held that much death. She didn't realize how late it was until she returned to her room and found the fire built up, the lamps lit. Someone had been in while she was gone, left water for washing, turned down the bed. The key was still in her pocket. She pulled it out, looked at it. Thought about Ronan, alone somewhere on this mountain, checking perimeters that didn't need checking because he couldn't stand to be around people on the night his past came too close. Thought about Alara, who'd seen a broken man and walked away. Thought about her own father, who'd drunk himself into a blizzard rather than face his failures. Thought about all the ways people survived and all the ways they didn't. Then she put the key in the drawer and left her door unlocked. Outside, wolves howled in the darkness. Inside, Blackthorn Lodge settled into silence. And somewhere between those two things, Calla Whitmore lay awake in her new life, wondering if she'd made a bargain with a monster or found something else entirely. Something broken enough to understand. Something broken enough to stay. Ronan didn't return until dawn. Calla heard him in the hallway, boots heavy on the wooden floor, pausing outside her door for a moment that stretched too long. She lay perfectly still, holding her breath, waiting to see if he'd try the handle. He didn't. His footsteps moved on, and a door clicked shut somewhere down the hall. She exhaled slowly, staring at the ceiling beams. 3 days married to a stranger, and already she was learning to read his silence like a language. The way he moved through Blackthorn Lodge like a ghost in his own house. The way the pack watched him, not with fear exactly, but with the carefulness of people who'd learned not to push too hard. The way he never, not once, looked at that locked door to the lower tunnels. Morning brought Margot with breakfast on a tray. "Ronan's already out with the hunting party," she said, setting it down. "Probably won't be back until afternoon. You need anything?" "I need to understand this place." Calla sat up, wrapping the quilt around her shoulders. The room was warm, but the cold from outside seemed to seep through the walls anyway. "What am I supposed to do here? What does an alpha's wife actually do?" Margot settled into the chair by the fireplace, clearly prepared for this conversation. "Officially, you represent the pack in territorial councils. You oversee household management. You stand beside Ronan when other alphas visit, show them we're stable and strong. And unofficially, you survive, same as the rest of us." The older woman's face softened slightly. "Look, I know this wasn't a love match. Everyone knows. But you're here now, and that makes you part of Blackthorn. The pack takes care of its own. Even the ones who got bought? Especially those." Margot stood. "Get dressed. I'll show you around properly. If you're going to be mistress of this lodge, you should at least know where everything is." The tour took most of the morning. Blackthorn Lodge was even larger than Calla had realized, 3 full stories above ground, plus what Margot called the old sections that dated back to when this had been a mining camp. Storage rooms filled with enough food to feed 60 people through a harsh winter. Workshops for blacksmithing, leatherwork, weaving. A smokehouse, a spring house, a massive root cellar carved into the mountain itself. "We're mostly self-sufficient," Margot explained as they walked. "Have to be. Snow closes the passes 4 months a year, sometimes 5. Anything we can't make or grow ourselves, we trade for during summer." "The trading post," Calla said suddenly. "My father's post. Ronan could use it for supplies." "Could." Margot gave her a sidelong look. "If he wasn't so stubborn about staying isolated up here. He doesn't like going down to the settlements anymore. Too many questions, too many people." They passed the restricted door again. Calla slowed, staring at it. "Don't," Margot said quietly. "Don't what?" "Whatever you're thinking, those tunnels have been sealed for 5 years. Ronan forbids anyone from going down there. Why seal them at all? Why not just collapse them completely? Because some of the pack wanted to bury their dead properly, wanted to retrieve bodies, have a real funeral." Margot's voice went flat. "Ronan wouldn't allow it, said the tunnels were too unstable, that we'd already lost enough people. So he sealed the entrance, and that was that." "But the bodies are still down there." "Yes." Calla touched the door, felt the cold radiating through the wood. "His brother?" "Adrian. He was 23, sweet kid, always laughing. He and Ronan were close, closer than most brothers. When Adrian died," Margot trailed off. "Ronan hasn't been the same since. Won't talk about it. Won't let anyone else talk about it. Just carries it all inside like a stone. That's not healthy. You try telling him that." They moved on, but Calla kept thinking about those tunnels, about 17 bodies sealed in darkness, about a man who'd rather live above a tomb than face what was buried below. Lunch was a quieter affair than dinner had been. Just Calla, Margot, and a handful of others who worked in the lodge itself. A young woman named Sarah, who managed the gardens and greenhouses. 2 brothers, Cole and James, who handled livestock and hunting rotations. An older man called Finn, who served as Ronan's second in command, though he seemed about as communicative as his alpha. "You settling in all right?" Finn asked gruffly, not quite meeting her eyes. "As well as can be expected. Ronan treating you fair?" The question had an edge to it, like Finn was ready to do something if the answer was no. "He's been—" Calla searched for the right word. "Respectful." "Good." Finn relaxed slightly. Some of the pack were worried, after Alara. Thought maybe he'd gotten too hard, too closed off. "What happened with her, Calla asked. "I heard she left, but not why." The table went quiet. Sarah spoke up, young and earnest. "She was awful to him. After the collapse, when he was still healing, she came to visit once. Took one look at him, and you could just see it on her face. Disgust, like he'd become something shameful. She said she couldn't marry a broken man," Cole added, anger threading his voice. "Said she deserved better than spending her life nursing an invalid." "He wasn't an invalid," James cut in. "Ribs healed, back healed. He was walking within 2 months. Wasn't about the body," Finn said quietly. "Was about the grief. Alara couldn't handle being around someone that damaged inside. So she left, and Ronan, he took it as proof that he was right, that he was too broken for anyone to love." Calla sat with that knowledge like a weight, understanding Ronan a little better now, understanding why he'd offered her a business arrangement instead of anything real. Why he'd promised separate rooms and locked doors and no expectations. He'd already been rejected once, wasn't about to risk it again. "He needs someone who'll stay," Sarah said softly, almost to herself. "Someone who won't run when things get hard." They were all looking at Calla now, waiting, hoping, maybe, that she'd be different. She had no idea how to tell them she was just as broken as Ronan was, just as trapped by circumstances. That she'd only married him to save her brothers, and given the choice, she'd have picked any other life. But she didn't say that, just nodded and finished her meal in silence. That afternoon, Calla wrote to Daniel and Marcus. A long letter explaining Blackthorn Lodge, describing the mountains, the pack, the strange new life she was building. She didn't mention Ronan's scars or the sealed tunnels or the fact that she still kept a knife under her pillow just in case. Let them think she was safe. Let them sleep easy. She was sealing the envelope when someone knocked. Not Margot this time. A younger woman with dark braided hair and cautious eyes. "I'm Isla," she said. "I manage the archives. Margot said you might want to see the pack records, help you understand the territory better." "Archives?" "Maps, treaties, trade agreements, everything documenting Iron Wolf Ridge and the settlements around it." Isla shifted her weight. "It's a lot of information, but if you're going to represent the pack at territorial councils, you'll need to know it." It was something to do, something to focus on besides the silence of this massive lodge. "Show me." The archive room was on the 3rd floor, tucked under the eaves. Shelves crammed with ledgers and rolled maps and stacks of correspondence going back decades. A window overlooked the valley, snow-covered and achingly beautiful in the afternoon light. Isla pulled down several volumes. "This is the current treaty map. Red marks hostile territories, yellow means neutral, green are allies." She spread it across the table. "We don't have many allies anymore." Calla studied the map. Iron Wolf Ridge was surrounded by red and yellow, with only 2 small green marks to the south. Why? After the collapse, Ronan pulled back from territorial politics, stopped attending councils, stopped negotiating trade. Other alphas took it as weakness or arrogance, depending on who you ask. Isla traced a line on the map. "See this? Used to be a major trade route through our territory. Generated income, kept relationships strong. Ronan closed it 3 years ago." Why would he do that? Because it ran directly over the collapsed section of tunnels. He was afraid the traffic would destabilize what was left. Ela looked uncomfortable. Finn argued against it, said we needed the trade income. Ronan wouldn't budge. Calla kept studying the map, pieces falling into place. Ronan hadn't just sealed the tunnels. He'd sealed off the entire eastern approach to Iron Wolf Ridge, cut off routes and relationships and revenue, all to avoid the risk of another collapse. He was suffocating his own pack trying to keep them safe. "What else?" she asked. Isla pulled down more ledgers, supply records showing declining trade, population records showing families leaving Iron Wolf Ridge for other territories, financial accounts that made Calla's stomach turn. Blackthorn Lodge was wealthy, yes, but only because Ronan had been spending down reserves rather than generating new income. "At this rate," Calla said slowly, running the numbers, "the pack has maybe 5 years before the money runs out. Less if we have another hard winter." Isla's voice was barely a whisper. "Nobody wants to tell Ronan because he'll just say we'll make do, cut rations, close sections of the lodge. He doesn't understand that people are already leaving because they don't see a future here. Does Finn know?" "Finn knows. Tried to talk to Ronan about it last year. They didn't speak for 3 months afterward." Isla started putting the ledgers away. "I'm only telling you this because Margot said you're smart. Said maybe you'd see things differently. Maybe you could help." Calla sat back, overwhelmed. She'd walked into this marriage thinking she was the desperate one, the one with no options. But Ronan was just as trapped, maybe more so, trapped by guilt and grief and the weight of keeping his pack safe from dangers that might not even exist anymore. "I need to see those tunnels," she said. "What? No, Ronan's not here." Calla stood, decision crystallizing. "And if I'm going to help this pack, I need to understand what we're actually dealing with. Not the stories, not the fear, the truth." Isla looked terrified. "He'll know. He always knows when someone goes near that door." "Then he'll be angry with me, not you. Come on. You said the archives have old mining maps. I need to see them." It took 20 minutes to find the right documents. Original survey maps from before the collapse, showing the full tunnel network beneath Iron Wolf Ridge. Calla spread them across the table, tracing routes with her finger. "This doesn't make sense, she muttered. "The collapse happened here," she pointed, "in the eastern shaft. But Ronan sealed all the entrances, even the western access point that's nowhere near the damage. He said the whole system was unstable, or he didn't want anyone going down there at all." Calla straightened. "Where's the western entrance?" "Calla, please." "Where?" Isla closed her eyes. "Old maintenance access behind the smokehouse, but it's chained shut, has been for years." Calla was already moving, maps tucked under her arm. She heard Isla calling after her but didn't stop. Down 2 flights of stairs, through the kitchen where Margot looked up sharply, out the back door into the brutal cold. The smokehouse sat at the edge of the compound, half built into the mountainside. Calla circled around back and found it. A narrow door set into the rock face, secured with a heavy chain and padlock. She stood there breathing frost, staring at that lock. Every reasonable part of her brain screamed that this was stupid, that Ronan had forbidden entry for a reason, that she was risking everything over curiosity. But she kept thinking about those financial records, about the pack slowly bleeding away, about Ronan making decisions based on fear instead of facts. She needed to know what was really down there. The chain was old, the lock older. Calla went back inside, grabbed a heavy file from the workshop, and spent 15 minutes working at the lock mechanism until something gave way with a rusty crack. The chain fell free. She grabbed a lantern from the smokehouse, lit it with shaking hands, and pulled open the door. Darkness yawned below. Stone steps leading down into the mountain. The air that rushed out was cold and stale, untouched for years. Calla descended. The tunnel was rougher than she'd expected, clearly hand-cut, reinforced with timber that had started to rot in places. Her lantern threw wild shadows on the walls. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, a steady rhythm that echoed like a heartbeat. She walked for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The tunnel branched, and she followed the map in her head, moving deeper into the mountain, toward the eastern shaft where the collapse had happened. The temperature dropped. Her breath came out in white clouds. Then she rounded a corner and stopped dead. The tunnel ahead was completely blocked, not by a collapse, by a wall. Someone had bricked up the entire passage, mortared it shut, left no way through. Calla moved closer, held the lantern up. The mortar was dark with age, but still solid. And scratched into the bricks, over and over in handwriting she recognized from the lodge's records, was a single word: forgive. She traced the letters with cold fingers, heart hammering. This wasn't a safety measure. This was a monument, a confession. Ronan had sealed these tunnels himself, brick by brick, writing his guilt into the mortar. Behind the wall, muffled but unmistakable, she heard something shift. Calla jerked back, nearly dropping the lantern. Hello? No answer. Just that sound again, rock on rock, like something moving in the darkness beyond the wall. Is someone down here? The scraping stopped, then so faint she almost missed it. Leave. The voice was wrong, rough and rasping, like it hadn't been used in years. Like it came from something that used to be human but wasn't anymore. Calla ran. Up through the tunnels, lungs burning, lantern swinging wildly. Behind her, the darkness seemed to follow, full of sounds that might have been falling rock or might have been footsteps. She didn't look back, just climbed those stone steps 3 at a time and burst out into the winter afternoon gasping. Ronan stood by the smokehouse. His face was absolutely still, the kind of still that meant violence was close to the surface. Margot told me you went outside, he said quietly. Too quietly. I came to make sure you hadn't gotten lost in the snow. Calla tried to catch her breath. I'm fine. Just exploring. His eyes moved to the open door behind her, to the broken chain in the snow, to the lantern still clutched in her shaking hands. Get inside, I said, he said. Now. She'd never heard that tone from him before. Not anger, something colder, something that made every instinct scream run. But she'd spent too many years standing her ground against her father's drunken rages. She didn't run now. There's someone down there, she said instead. I heard them. Behind the wall you built. Ronan's jaw worked. You heard the mountain settling, old timbers shifting. There's no one down there. I heard a voice. You heard what you wanted to hear. He took a step toward her, and Calla saw the way his hands were shaking, not with rage, with something else entirely. Those tunnels are forbidden for a reason. They're unstable, dangerous. You could have died. I could also have found answers about why you're letting this pack die slowly instead of facing what's buried down there. The words hung between them like a blade. Ronan's face went white. What did you say? I've seen the financial records, the population decline. You're killing Iron Wolf Ridge trying to protect it from ghosts. Calla gestured toward the door. There's nothing down there but your guilt, Ronan. Just old rock and old grief, and you've built your entire life around avoiding it. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me I'm wrong. Tell me there's an actual structural reason those tunnels need to stay sealed. Show me an engineer's report. Anything besides your fear. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. His eyes were wild, pupils blown. You want to know what's down there? You want the truth? Yes? 17 bodies that I didn't save. My brother, who trusted me to keep him safe. 6 survivors who lived because I chose them over others who were still breathing when I ran out of time. His voice cracked. That's what's buried down there. My failure. My choices. The proof that I wasn't strong enough or fast enough or good enough to save the people who depended on me. Calla stared at him. At this powerful, frightening man who was barely holding himself together. That's not... Don't! He let go of her wrist like she'd burned him. Don't tell me it wasn't my fault. Don't give me empty comfort. You weren't there. You didn't hear them screaming. Didn't have to choose who lived and who died in the time it took for everything to come down. But you did choose. You saved 6 people who would have died otherwise. And 11 others died waiting for me to come back. Died knowing I'd left them. Ronan turned away, his whole body rigid. The woman you heard? You didn't hear anyone. There's no one alive down there. But if you want to believe in ghosts, fine. Maybe that's what I deserve. Maybe I should hear them. Calla's throat tightened. She thought about that voice in the darkness. about the way it had sounded wrong, broken. Ronan, go back inside. Stay away from those tunnels. And if you can't follow that one simple rule, then maybe Alara was right. Maybe I am too broken for this. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the twilight. Calla stood alone by the smokehouse, watching snow start to fall. Behind her, the tunnel entrance gaped like a wound. In front of her, the lodge rose against the darkening sky, beautiful and lonely and full of people trying to survive around a man who couldn't forgive himself for being human. She thought about going after him, about trying to fix this. But Margot found her first, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "Come on, you're freezing." "I heard someone," Calla said numbly. "Down in the tunnels. A voice." Margot's face went strange. "What did it say?" "Leave." Just that one word. The older woman was quiet for a long moment. Then, "There are stories. About the collapse. About how some of the miners survived for days in air pockets, calling for help that never came. By the time Ronan sealed the tunnels, most of them had stopped screaming. Most. Not all." Horror crawled up Calla's spine. "You're saying someone could still be alive down there?" "I'm saying nobody knows. Ronan wouldn't let anyone check, sealed it all up and forbade anyone from asking questions." Margot guided her toward the lodge. "Maybe he heard them too. Maybe that's why he can't bear to go back down." That night, Calla couldn't sleep. She kept hearing that voice, kept seeing the words scratched into the bricks. Forgive. Over and over, like Ronan had been pleading with the dead, or with himself. She got up, wrapped herself in a heavy robe, and padded down the hallway. Ronan's door was closed, no light showing underneath, but she could hear movement inside, pacing, the same restless energy she'd felt radiating off him by the smokehouse. She knocked before she could talk herself out of it. The pacing stopped, long silence, then, "What? Can I come in?" "No." Calla tried the handle anyway. It was unlocked. She pushed the door open. Ronan stood by the window, still fully dressed, arms crossed. His room was sparse: bed, desk, single chair. No personal items. No comfort. Like he was camping in his own house. "I said no," he repeated. "I know. I'm ignoring you." Calla closed the door behind her. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." "There's everything to talk about. Starting with the fact that you're destroying yourself and this pack because you won't face what happened 5 years ago." His shoulders tensed. "Get out." "No." She moved closer, heart pounding. "You want to be angry with me? Fine, be angry, but I'm not leaving until you hear what I have to say." Ronan turned, and the look in his eyes should have sent her running. "You've been here less than a week. You don't know me. You don't know this pack. You don't get to come in here and tell me how to grieve." "You're right. I don't know you. But I know what it looks like when someone's drowning." Calla held her ground. "My father drowned in whiskey and debt. My mother drowned in sickness she couldn't fight. I've watched people give up, Ronan, and that's what you're doing. You're giving up." "I'm keeping my pack safe. You're keeping them imprisoned. There's a difference. You're keeping..." She pulled the financial ledger from her robe pocket. She'd grabbed it from the archives before coming up. "You want to keep them safe? Then stop bleeding money. Reopen the trade routes. Let people back into those tunnels to recover their dead and say goodbye properly. Stop making decisions based on fear." He looked at the ledger like it was a snake. "Where did you get that?" "Isla showed me. Because she's worried. Because everyone's worried, but they're too afraid to tell you." Calla set it on the desk between them. "You have 5 years. Maybe less. Then Blackthorn Lodge fails and everyone here has to scatter to survive. Is that what you want? Is that your legacy?" "My legacy," Ronan said coldly, "is 17 dead people. Nothing else matters." "Then let me help you change it." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "How? By poking around in sealed tunnels? By dragging up the past? That won't bring them back, Calla. Nothing will. But it might let you move forward." She took a breath. "I can't imagine what you went through. I can't. But I know this. The people who survived that collapse, who you saved, they stayed. They're still here. This pack is still here. They believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself. Don't waste that. Ronan stared at her for a long moment. Then he sank into the chair by his desk, suddenly looking exhausted. You don't understand. If I go back down there, if I open those tunnels and find, if there's any chance someone survived and I left them. He couldn't finish the sentence. Calla knelt beside him, making him look at her. Then we find out, together, and whatever's there, whatever truth we uncover, we face it, because living in this hell of not knowing is worse than any answer. Is it? His voice broke. Because I'm not sure I can survive the answer. You won't have to survive it alone. Something shifted in his expression. Confusion, maybe. Or the first fragile edge of hope. Why are you doing this? You didn't sign up for this. You married me for money and security, not to fix my broken pieces. Maybe. Calla managed a small smile. Or maybe I'm just stubborn. Maybe I can't stand watching someone suffer when there might be a way out. Maybe. She hesitated. Maybe I need to save someone, even if it's not myself. Ronan reached out slowly like he was afraid she'd vanish. His fingers brushed her cheek. You're insane. Probably. This won't end well. Most things don't. He almost smiled. Almost. If we do this, if we go down there, and we find something that proves I should have done more, that people died because of my choices, then we deal with it, together. She stood, pulling him up with her. But we can't move forward until we face what's buried. You know that. Ronan was quiet. Then, so softly she almost missed it. On the anniversary. 2 weeks. I'll go down with you then. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Calla nodded. 2 weeks. She turned to leave, but his hand caught hers. Calla, thank you for not running. Where would I go? She squeezed his fingers once. This is home now, for better or worse. She left him standing there in his sparse room and walked back to her own. Outside, the wind howled through the peaks. Inside, Blackthorn Lodge settled deeper into silence. But something had shifted. Some small crack in the wall Ronan had built around himself. In 2 weeks, they'd find out what lay beneath Iron Wolf Ridge, what secrets the darkness held, what truth had been buried with 17 bodies and 5 years of guilt. Calla crawled into bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the mountain groan under the weight of winter. Somewhere in the tunnels below, something moved, something waited, and for the first time since arriving at this strange, lonely place, she felt like she'd made the right choice, even if it might destroy them both. The 2 weeks didn't pass quietly. Word spread through Blackthorn Lodge faster than Calla expected. The new Alpha's wife had gone into the forbidden tunnels and lived to tell about it. More than that, she'd somehow convinced Ronan to go back down with her. The pack didn't know whether to be grateful or terrified. Calla caught the whispers in hallways, saw the way people looked at her now. Not quite trust, but something close. Like maybe she was crazy enough to actually change things. She spent those days preparing, studied the old mining maps until she had every tunnel memorized, talked to the 6 survivors Ronan had pulled out, piecing together what they remembered about the collapse. Most of them were reluctant to speak, but a few opened up once they understood what she was trying to do. The eastern shaft gave way first, Cole told her one afternoon in the workshop. He was one of the survivors, his left arm still crooked from where it had been crushed and healed wrong. Sounded like Thunder Underground. We all ran, but the supports were already failing. Ronan came back 3 times, kept going deeper even when the ceiling was coming down around him. How did he choose who to save? Calla asked quietly. Cole looked uncomfortable. He didn't. He just grabbed whoever he could reach and dragged them out. There wasn't time for choosing. The whole thing maybe lasted 20 minutes from first collapse to when it all came down. He paused. Adrian, Ronan's brother, he was deeper in. Last we saw him, he was trying to shore up a support beam so others could get past. Ronan went back for him, but the second collapse hit. Yeah, Ronan barely made it out himself. Came up covered in blood, half his back torn open from falling timber. Started trying to go back down and it took 4 of us to hold him back. He fought like an animal, kept screaming Adrian's name. Cole's voice went rough. We had to knock him out. It was the only way to stop him from killing himself trying to dig through rock with his bare hands. Calla felt something crack open in her chest. No one ever told him it wasn't his fault? Everyone told him. He didn't listen. Still doesn't. Cole met her eyes. You really think going back down there will help? I think it's the only chance he has at healing. If there's any possibility someone survived, we need to know. And if they didn't, she took a breath. Then maybe seeing the truth will let him finally put it to rest. Or it'll break him completely. That's a risk I have to take. The days crawled by. Ronan avoided her, throwing himself into pack business with manic intensity. He was gone before dawn, back after dark, always finding some excuse not to be in the same room. Calla didn't push. Let him have his space to prepare however he needed. But she saw the toll it was taking, the shadows under his eyes getting darker. The way his hands shook sometimes when he thought no one was looking. The night she heard him pacing his room until almost sunrise, footsteps like a caged animal. On the morning of the anniversary, Calla woke to find fresh snow falling, heavy and silent, the kind that smothered sound. She dressed in layers, wool pants, thick shirt, heavy coat, sturdy boots, tucked a knife into her belt, coiled rope over her shoulder. Margot caught her at breakfast. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Even if it destroys him? Especially then. Calla met the older woman's gaze. He's already destroyed Margot. This is the only way to rebuild. Finn was waiting outside the western tunnel entrance when she arrived. He'd brought supplies, lanterns, rope, a pick in case they needed to break through debris. His expression was grim. Ronan's not coming, he said flatly. Calla's stomach dropped. What? Left 2 hours ago. Took his horse and rode out alone, didn't say where. Finn kicked at the snow. I should have known. He's been looking for a way out of this since you first suggested it. Did he go to the eastern entrance? No idea, but if you're still planning to go down... Finn hesitated. I'll come with you. Someone should. Calla looked at the tunnel entrance, then back toward the lodge. Ronan had run. Had chosen avoidance over facing his past, just like he'd been doing for 5 years. She could let it go. Could wait for another day, another chance. Or she could go down there herself and find whatever truth was buried, so that when Ronan finally came back, she'd have answers for him whether he wanted them or not. No, she said. I need to do this alone, but stay here. If I'm not back in 2 hours, come looking. Calla. 2 hours, Finn. She didn't give him time to argue. Just grabbed a lantern, lit it, and descended into the mountain. The tunnel looked different in daylight filtering down through the entrance. Still cold, still dark, but somehow less threatening. Calla moved quickly, following the route she'd memorized. Down through the main passage, past the first branch, deeper into the mountain's heart. The wall she'd found before loomed ahead. Brick and mortar, forgive. Carved over and over in Ronan's desperate hand. Calla set down her lantern and pulled out the pick. The first swing sent chips of mortar flying. The second cracked a brick. By the 10th swing, her shoulders burned and sweat was freezing on her face despite the cold. Behind her, footsteps echoed in the tunnel. She spun, pick raised like a weapon. Ronan stood in the shadows just beyond her lantern's light. His face was haggard, eyes wild. What are you doing? What I came here to do. Calla turned back to the wall, swung again. Another brick cracked. You ran. I didn't. I told Finn to stop you. Finn works for you, not me. Crack. Another chunk of mortar fell away. You want to keep running, fine. But I'm done waiting. Ronan crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, grabbed the pick from her hands. You don't know what you're doing. What if the whole thing collapses? What if someone's still alive in there? Calla grabbed the pick back. What if Adrian survived and you've left him buried for 5 years because you were too afraid to look? He's dead. Ronan's voice cracked. They're all dead. I felt the mountain come down. Nothing could have survived. Then prove it. Help me break through this wall and prove it. She thrust the pick at him. Or leave, but I'm not stopping. They stared at each other. Calla could see him struggling, every instinct screaming at him to run, to seal this back up and never think about it again. Then something in his face hardened. He took the pick. Stand back, he said roughly. The wall came down in less than an hour. Ronan attacked it with a fury that was frightening to watch, swinging the pick like he was fighting the mountain itself. Bricks shattered. Mortar exploded into dust. When his hand started bleeding from the impact, he didn't slow down. Finally, a hole broke through. Air rushed out, stale and wrong, untouched for years. Ronan dropped the pick, breathing hard. His hands were shaking. "I can't." "Yes, you can." Calla grabbed her lantern, squeezed through the gap. "Come on." The chamber beyond was smaller than she'd expected. A natural cave that had been widened into a mining junction, with 3 tunnels branching off. And everywhere, was destruction. Collapsed supports, shattered rock, timber crushed into splinters. And bones. Not many. Most of the bodies must have been buried deeper in the collapse, but here and there, white fragments visible in the rubble. A skull, half hidden under a fallen beam. An arm still wearing a torn sleeve. Ronan made a sound like he'd been gutted. Calla moved deeper into the chamber, holding the lantern high. The eastern tunnel was completely blocked, tons of rock that would take weeks to clear. The southern passage was partially collapsed, but navigable. The western one... She stopped. "Ronan, look." A crude shelter had been built against the western tunnel's entrance. Scraps of timber arranged into walls, a torn blanket stretched overhead, empty water containers, a cache of emergency supplies that had been opened and mostly consumed. Someone had survived the collapse, had lived here in the darkness for days, maybe weeks, waiting for rescue that never came. Ronan stumbled forward, fell to his knees beside the shelter. His hands touched the blanket, the supplies, shaking so badly he could barely hold on to anything. No. "They might have gotten out," Calla said quickly. "Through the western tunnel. Maybe they..." "The western tunnel floods every spring." His voice was hollow. "Snowmelt comes down from the peaks, fills the lower sections. Anyone trapped down here when that happened?" He couldn't finish. Calla's throat closed. She moved to the shelter, looked closer, found scratches on the wall behind it. Words carved with something sharp. Day 4. Water running low. Low. Day 7. Heard voices above. Called for help. No response. Day 9. Cold. So cold. Day 11. Water rising. The last entry was just 2 words, carved deep and desperate. "Forgive me." Ronan saw it, and something inside him broke. He collapsed forward, forehead against the stone, and made a sound Calla had never heard from a human throat. Raw grief torn from somewhere so deep it had no words. She knelt beside him, put her hand on his back. "You didn't know." "I should have checked. Should have come back down once the initial collapse stabilized. Should have..." "You did everything you could. You saved 6 people, Ronan. 6 people who are alive right now because of you. And killed 11 others by not being good enough." He looked up at her, tears cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "Do you understand? I sealed them in. I built that wall and trapped whoever survived down here to die in the dark. You didn't know anyone had survived. I should have..." He surged to his feet, started pacing like a trapped animal. "I'm the alpha. I'm supposed to protect my pack. And instead He grabbed his hair, voice rising to a shout. "I was so broken over Adrian that I couldn't face coming back down, so someone else paid for my cowardice." The mountain groaned. They both froze. A long, deep sound like rock shifting under immense weight. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. "We need to leave," Calla said quietly. "Now." "Let it come down." Ronan's voice was flat. "Let me die here like I should have 5 years ago." "No." She grabbed his arm, tried to pull him toward the exit. "I didn't come this far to watch you give up." Another groan, louder this time. A crack spiderwebbed across the ceiling. Ronan didn't move. "Go, Calla. Get out while you still can. Not without you. I'm ordering you." "I don't follow your orders." She planted herself in front of him, grabbed his face with both hands. "Listen to me. What happened here was a tragedy. But you don't honor the dead by joining them. You honor them by living, by being better, by making sure their sacrifice meant something." "Their sacrifice?" He laughed bitterly. "They didn't sacrifice anything. They just died while I..." The ceiling gave way. Time slowed. Calla saw the rock falling, saw Ronan frozen in his grief, and made a decision without thinking. She shoved him hard toward the exit passage, throwing all her weight behind it. He stumbled backward, off balance. The rock crashed down between them. Suddenly, Calla was on the wrong side of a wall of debris, coughing in the dust, her lantern flickering. She could hear Ronan shouting her name, but couldn't see him through the collapse. "I'm okay," she called back, even though her shoulder screamed where she'd hit the ground. "Go! Get out before it all comes down!" "I'm not leaving you!" More rock fell. The mountain was waking up, centuries of unstable tunnels finally giving way. Calla scrambled backward, looking for another route out. The eastern tunnel was completely blocked. The southern passage was filling with debris even as she watched. That left the western tunnel, the one that flooded every spring. She grabbed her lantern and ran. Behind her, she could hear Ronan screaming her name, hear him trying to dig through the collapse with his bare hands. But the mountain was faster. Rock thundered down, each impact shaking the ground. The western tunnel sloped downward, twisting through the mountain's guts. Calla's lantern threw wild shadows on the walls. Her breath came in ragged gasps. The rope coiled over her shoulder kept catching on protruding rocks, slowing her down. Water. She could hear water ahead, running water, which meant the spring melt was early this year, which meant... She rounded a corner and her heart stopped. The tunnel ahead was flooded. Dark water filled the passage from wall to wall, disappearing into the depths. No way to tell how deep it went or how far she'd have to swim to reach another air pocket. Behind her, the mountain groaned again. She had maybe seconds before this entire section collapsed. Calla didn't hesitate. She grabbed a deep breath, held the lantern up to see as far into the water as possible, then dove. The cold hit like a physical blow. So cold it stopped her heart for a beat, made her lungs seize up. She kicked forward anyway, one arm stretched ahead holding the lantern, the other pulling her through the water. The tunnel curved, narrowed. Calla's shoulder scraped rock, sending pain shooting through her arm. The lantern was dying, light flickering. She couldn't see the surface, couldn't see anything but dark water and darker rock. Her lungs started burning. She kicked harder, desperate. The tunnel had to open up somewhere, had to... Her head broke the surface. Calla gasped, sucking in air that tasted like minerals and stone. The lantern was dead, drowned. Absolute darkness pressed in from all sides. She couldn't see her hand in front of her face, but she could hear something. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, a sound like breathing. "Hello?" Her voice echoed strangely. No answer, just that breathing, steady and wrong. Calla's skin prickled. She remembered the voice from before. Leave. The way it had sounded broken, inhuman. "Is someone there?" She tried again. Movement in the darkness, something shifting closer, that breathing getting louder. Then a voice, so close it made her jump. "You came back." It was the same voice from before, rough and damaged like vocal cords that had been screaming too long. But there was something else there now, something almost human. "Who are you?" Calla whispered. A long pause, then, "I don't remember anymore. Been down here so long, tried to get out at first, swam through the water, but the tunnels just kept going. Eventually I stopped trying, just stayed here in the dark." Horror crawled up Calla's spine. "How long?" "Don't know. Lost track after the first year. Maybe 2 years now? Maybe 3? The water brings fish sometimes. Blind fish from the deep places. I eat those." A sound that might have been a laugh. Funny what you can survive when you have to. "You were in the collapse 5 years ago." "Was I?" Hard to remember. Everything before the dark gets fuzzy. Closer now. Close enough that Calla could feel breath on her face. "Are you real? Or am I imagining you?" "I'm real." Calla forced herself to stay calm even though every instinct screamed run. "What's your name? Please, try to remember." Silence. That labored breathing. Then, hesitant. "Thomas?" "No, that's not right. Thomas was someone else. Someone who died in the first collapse. I'm... Behind them, the mountain groaned. The collapse was spreading, chasing Calla through the tunnels. "We need to move," she said. "Both of us. Can you swim?" "Don't want to leave. Safe here in the dark." It's not safe. The whole mountain's coming down. She reached out blindly, found an arm, skin and bone, barely any muscle left. Please, come with me. Let me help you. Why? Because nobody deserves to die alone in the dark. Calla grabbed the arm tighter. And because the man who sealed these tunnels, Ronan, he's been drowning in guilt for 5 years thinking everyone was dead. If I can bring you out alive, maybe it'll save him too. The breathing stopped. Then, Ronan? You know him? He tried to save me. During the collapse, pulled me from under a beam, told me to run. A pause. But I went back. Someone was trapped deeper in, couldn't leave them. By the time I got them out, the second collapse hit. Thought Ronan died in it. Calla's throat tightened. He didn't. He's alive. He's been blaming himself for not saving everyone. Should blame me instead. The voice was bitter. I was supposed to be helping evacuate. Instead, I played hero and got trapped. Another groan from the mountain. Closer now. Rock grinding against rock. Blame later, Calla said. Swim now. Can you do that? A moment of hesitation, then a hand found hers in the darkness, gripping tight. Lead the way. They swam together through black water, Calla guiding them forward by feel. Her shoulder screamed where she'd hit the ground earlier. Her lungs burned. The water was so cold she couldn't feel her legs anymore. But behind them, the mountain was collapsing, each groan louder than the last. They had to keep moving. The tunnel turned, rose. Calla's head broke the surface again, and this time she saw light, faint, distant, but there. Daylight filtering down through cracks in the rock. Almost there, she gasped. Keep going. They swam toward the light. Calla's muscles were giving out, each stroke weaker than the last. The person behind her, whoever they were, was barely keeping their head above water. But they were so close. So close. The tunnel opened into a vertical shaft, natural chimney in the rock, climbing up toward the surface. Calla could see sky now, gray and heavy with snow, but sky. She grabbed the rope still coiled over her shoulder, found a protruding rock, and started climbing. Below her, the survivor grabbed the rope and followed, moving with the jerky weakness of someone who hadn't used their muscles in years. Calla's hands were numb. She kept climbing anyway, inch by painful inch. The surface was 20 feet away, then 15, then 10. Below, the mountain gave one final massive groan. The shaft shuddered. Rock cracked. Climb! Calla screamed. They scrambled up the last few feet just as the shaft collapsed behind them, rock thundering into the depths. Calla grabbed the edge of the opening and hauled herself out into the snow, gasping. A second later, a hand appeared behind her. She grabbed it, pulled. The survivor tumbled out beside her, coughing up black water. They lay there in the snow, both shaking, both barely conscious. Around them, the mountain groaned and settled, the collapse spreading through the old tunnel network like a cancer. Calla turned her head, looked at the person she'd just saved. It was a woman. Maybe 30, maybe 50. Impossible to tell under the grime and scars. Long hair matted into tangles, clothes rotted to rags, eyes that had been in darkness so long they were squinting even in the dim daylight. "What's your name?" Calla asked again. The woman stared at the sky like she'd never seen it before. "Iris," she whispered. "I'm Iris. I was Adrian's fiancée." Calla's blood turned to ice. "Adrian? Ronan's brother Adrian? Yes, I was in the tunnels when the collapse hit, trying to find him, but I was too late. He was already—" Iris's face crumpled. "He died saving others, just like Ronan tried to save everyone. And I've been down there ever since, thinking everyone had forgotten about us." Footsteps crunched through the snow. Calla looked up. Ronan stood 10 feet away, covered in dust and blood from digging through rock. His eyes were wide, disbelieving, locked on the woman beside Calla. "Iris?" His voice broke on the name. Iris turned, saw him, made a sound like all the grief of 5 years compressed into a single breath. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I couldn't save him. I tried, but I couldn't save Adrian." Ronan dropped to his knees in the snow. And the man who had carried 5 years of guilt, who had sealed himself away from the world, who had been convinced he'd killed everyone through his failure. That man finally broke. Ronan didn't move for a long time, just knelt there in the snow, staring at Iris like she was a ghost made flesh. Calla pushed herself up on shaking arms, every muscle screaming. "We need to get her inside. She's been down there for 5 years. She needs medical attention." That broke through. Ronan surged forward, scooped Iris up like she weighed nothing. The woman made a small sound of protest, but she was too weak to fight. Her eyes kept closing, then snapping open like she was afraid the daylight would disappear. "Finn!" Ronan's voice cracked across the valley. "Finn, get Margot, now!" The pack appeared from everywhere at once. They must have been searching for Ronan and Calla, must have heard the collapse. Finn took one look at Iris and went white. "That's impossible," he breathed. "Nothing's impossible." Ronan was already moving toward the lodge, carrying Iris with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the wildness in his eyes. "Get the healer. Get blankets. Get whatever she needs." Calla tried to stand and her legs gave out. Cole caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy," he said. "You're half frozen yourself." "I'm fine. Help Iris." "We've got her. You nearly died down there too." He started guiding her toward the lodge. "What the hell happened?" Calla told him in broken sentences as they walked. The wall, the collapse, the flooded tunnel, finding Iris alive in the darkness. By the time they reached the lodge, her teeth were chattering so hard she could barely speak. Margot took one look at her and started barking orders. Hot water, dry clothes, food. Within minutes, Calla found herself in her room with a fire roaring and Margot peeling off her frozen clothes like she was a child. "You're insane," the older woman muttered. "Going down there alone, swimming through flooded tunnels. You could have died a dozen different ways." "But I didn't." Calla's hand shook as she tried to hold the blanket around herself. "Is Iris—" "The healer's with her now. She's alive, which is more than anyone expected, but she's not good, malnourished, dehydrated. Her eyes can barely handle light. Who knows what 5 years in complete darkness did to her mind?" Margot's voice softened. "But she's alive. You brought her back alive. That's something." "I brought her back for Ronan." Calla's teeth finally stopped chattering. He needed to know it wasn't all death down there, that someone survived. "You brought her back for yourself too." Margot met her eyes. "Don't pretend you're not just as broken as he is, just as desperate to prove something can be saved." The truth of it hit like a fist. Calla looked away. Margot sighed. "Get some rest. You earned it." But Calla couldn't rest. As soon as Margot left, she forced herself to dress and made her way down the hall to the room where they'd taken Iris. Ronan sat beside the bed, holding Iris's hand. The healer, an older man named Thomas, was checking her vitals, his face grim. "She needs time," Thomas said quietly. "Weeks, maybe months to recover properly. Her body's forgotten how to process real food. Her eyes need to relearn light. And her mind—" He trailed off. 5 years alone in the dark does things to a person. "Whatever she needs," Ronan said. "Whatever it costs." Thomas nodded and left, passing Calla in the doorway. She hesitated, not sure if she should intrude. Ronan saw her. "Come in." She did, moving to stand on the other side of the bed. Iris looked so small under the blankets, so fragile. Her breathing was shallow but steady. "She told me what happened," Ronan said, voice raw. "Before she passed out. Said she was looking for Adrian when the second collapse hit. Got trapped in an air pocket. Survived on emergency supplies and water seeping through the rocks. When those ran out, she found the flooded tunnel and the fish. She thought everyone had forgotten about her. We did." His jaw tightened. "I sealed her in there and never looked back. I was so consumed by my own grief that I didn't even think—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Adrian loved her. He would have wanted me to save her, and instead I buried her alive." Calla sat down heavily in the other chair. "You didn't know." "I should have checked. Should have gone back down once things stabilized. Should have—" "Stop." She leaned forward. "Listen to me, Ronan. You made the best decision you could with the information you had. The tunnels were unstable. You'd already lost your brother. You were trying to prevent more deaths. And instead I caused one. 5 years of suffering because I was too broken to face the possibility of survivors. But she did survive. Against every odd, Iris survived. And now she's here, and she's going to heal, and you get a chance to make this right. Calla reached across the bed, covered his hand with hers. Don't waste that chance drowning in guilt. Ronan looked at their joined hands. You almost died today. Because of me. Because I ran instead of facing this like I should have. I made my own choice. You didn't force me down there, but I drove you to it. If I'd been stronger, if I'd dealt with this years ago, then you wouldn't be the man I married. The words slipped out before Calla could stop them. You'd be someone else entirely. Someone who didn't understand what it means to be broken. Someone I couldn't. She stopped, suddenly aware of what she was about to say. Ronan was staring at her. Couldn't what? Calla pulled her hand back, heart hammering. Nothing. I should let you rest. Calla. She stood. She's going to need you when she wakes up. Be there for her. That's what matters now. She left before he could respond, her pulse racing. What had she almost said? That she couldn't trust someone who wasn't broken? That she couldn't understand them? That she couldn't love them? The thought stopped her cold in the hallway. She pressed her back against the wall, tried to breathe through the panic rising in her chest. She'd married Ronan out of desperation. A business arrangement, nothing more. They'd been together barely a month. She couldn't possibly have developed actual feelings for him in that time. But standing in that flooded tunnel, not knowing if she'd make it out alive, the only thing she'd been able to think about was getting back to him, making sure he knew the truth about the collapse, proving to him that he wasn't the monster he thought he was. Damn it, she whispered to the empty hallway. The next few days were chaos. News of Iris's survival spread through the pack like wildfire, then beyond. Other alphas sent messengers demanding to know if the rumors were true. Territorial councils wanted updates. The whole frontier seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what this meant. Ronan handled it with a steadiness that surprised everyone. He stood before the pack and told them the truth, about the collapse, about his failure to search properly, about Calla finding Iris alive. He didn't make excuses, didn't try to soften his mistakes. I let fear control my decisions, he said, voice carrying through the packed main hall. Let grief blind me to possibilities. Someone suffered for 5 years because I wasn't strong enough to face the truth. He paused, looking around at faces he'd known for years. That changes now. The tunnels will be properly searched and cleared. Any remaining bodies will be recovered and given proper burial. The trade routes will reopen, and I will stop hiding from the past. The pack was silent for a moment. Then Finn stood. About damn time, he said gruffly. We've been waiting for you to come back to us. One by one, the others stood too, not in accusation, but in support, showing Ronan they were with him. Calla watched from the back of the hall, throat tight. This was what leadership looked like. Not perfection, not fearlessness, just honesty and the willingness to change. After the meeting, Ronan found her in the archive room where she'd been updating the territory maps. The eastern trade route, he said without preamble. You said reopening it would help the pack's finances. It would, significantly. Then we do it. I'll send word to the border settlements tomorrow. He moved to the window, looked out at the mountains. Finn's organizing a proper search team for the tunnels. We'll recover whoever's left, give them real funerals. That's good. And I'm stepping back from some of the day-to-day decisions, letting Finn and the council handle more. They don't need me micromanaging everything out of paranoia. Calla set down her pen. You're really doing this, actually changing things. I have to. He turned to face her. You risked your life to show me the truth. The least I can do is not waste that sacrifice. It wasn't a sacrifice. It was a choice. Why? The question was quiet, almost vulnerable. Why did you do it? You could have let me keep avoiding the tunnels, could have taken the easy path and just lived your life here without pushing. Calla stood, moved to join him at the window. Outside, snow was falling again, covering the mountain in fresh white. Because I know what it's like to be trapped by the past, to let fear make your decisions. I watched my father do it until it killed him. She took a breath. And because somewhere along the way, I started to care whether you drowned in your grief or found a way out. Care. Ronan repeated the word like he was testing its weight. Is that what you call it? Her heart kicked. What would you call it? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't know. I stopped letting myself feel things after Alara left. Safer that way. Less chance of getting hurt again. He looked at her. But you make it hard to stay numb. You push and challenge and refuse to let me hide. It's terrifying. Good. Calla managed a small smile. You needed terrifying. Did I need you almost dying in a flooded tunnel? Probably not. But you got it anyway. Something shifted in his expression. Before Calla could process what was happening, Ronan reached out and cupped her face with one scarred hand. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, gentle and hesitant. Thank you, he said quietly, for not giving up on me when everyone else had, even when I'd given up on myself. Calla's breath caught. They were standing so close she could feel the heat radiating off him, could count the flecks of darker gray in his pale eyes. You're welcome. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. When his lips met hers, it was tentative, careful, like he was afraid she'd shatter. Calla kissed him back, rising on her toes to close the distance. It wasn't fireworks or passion or any of the things romantic stories promised. It was quiet and real, and tasted like new beginnings. When they pulled apart, Ronan rested his forehead against hers. This complicates things. Everything's already complicated. Fair point. He smiled, and it reached his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. What do we do now? Now? Calla stepped back, tried to catch her breath. Now, you go check on Iris. I finish updating these maps, and tomorrow we start actually fixing this pack's problems, instead of just talking about them. Romantic. I'm not here for romance. I'm here for results. But she was smiling when she said it. Iris woke up 3 days later. Calla was sitting with her when it happened, reading aloud from a book while Ronan handled pack business. The woman's eyes fluttered open, struggled to focus. Where? Her voice was rusty with disuse. Blackthorn Lodge. You're safe. Calla set the book aside, moved closer. Do you remember getting out? Confusion clouded Iris's face, then clarity, then horror. Adrian! Where's Adrian? Calla's chest tightened. I'm sorry. He didn't make it out of the collapse. No, I saw him. He was trying to shore up the support so others could escape. I told him to run, but he wouldn't listen. Tears leaked from Iris's eyes. He saved at least 4 people before the ceiling came down. I tried to get to him, but I was too late. He died a hero. He died because he was too stubborn to save himself. Iris's hands twisted in the blanket. Just like Ronan, they were so alike that way, always putting everyone else first. The door opened. Ronan stood in the doorway, looking uncertain in a way Calla had never seen. Iris saw him and made a broken sound. You're alive. I thought. When I was trapped down there, I kept having nightmares that you died trying to save me. I did try. Ronan moved to the bedside, knelt so he was at her level. I searched the tunnels 3 times before the main collapse. I couldn't find you. I'm sorry. You had no reason to look for me. I wasn't even supposed to be in the tunnels that day. I was there looking for Adrian. Iris reached out with a shaking hand, touched his face. He loved you so much, was so proud of his older brother. His last words were about you. Ronan's composure cracked. What did he say? He said, tell Ronan it wasn't his fault. Tell him I chose this. Fresh tears spilled down Iris's cheeks. He knew the supports were failing. Knew he probably wouldn't make it out. But he stayed anyway because that's who he was. He was an idiot, Ronan said roughly. A brave, selfless idiot. Yeah. Iris managed a watery smile. He was, and he'd be furious if he knew you'd spent 5 years blaming yourself for his choice. They sat in silence for a moment, sharing grief that had been buried too long. Finally, Iris looked at Calla. You're the one who found me. Ronan told me before I passed out. You swam through the flooded tunnels. I had to know if anyone was still alive down there. Why? You don't know me. Don't know any of the people who died. Calla glanced at Ronan. Because someone I care about was destroying himself over what happened. I needed to give him a different ending. Iris's eyes sharpened despite her weakness. She looked between Calla and Ronan, seemed to understand something. Oh, I see. A pause. Good. He deserves someone who fights for him. We're not. Calla fumbled for words. Whatever you want to call it, hold on to it. Iris leaned back against the pillows, exhausted. I lost my chance at that. Don't waste yours. Over the next 2 weeks, the pack transformed. The search teams recovered 6 more bodies from the tunnels, including Adrian's. They held a proper funeral. The whole pack gathered on a hillside overlooking the valley. Ronan spoke words over his brother's grave that he should have said 5 years ago, about bravery and sacrifice and the kind of love that put others first. When he finished, he looked lighter somehow, like he'd finally set down a weight he'd been carrying too long. The trade routes reopened. Merchants started flowing through Iron Wolf Ridge again, bringing revenue and news from the outside world. Finn renegotiated treaties with neighboring packs, using Calla's research to strengthen alliances that had been neglected. Calla herself became an unexpected force in territorial politics. Other alphas had heard about the woman who'd convinced Ronan Vexley to change, who'd survived flooded tunnels to save someone everyone thought was dead. When she spoke at council meetings, people listened. You're good at this, Ronan told her after one particularly successful negotiation. Better than I ever was. I'm good at seeing what people need and finding ways to give it to them. You're good at the bigger picture. She squeezed his hand. We work better together. Is that your way of saying you want to make this partnership official, not just on paper? Calla's heart jumped. Are you asking me to actually marry you? We're already married. Technically, yes, but that was a business arrangement. Ronan pulled her close, voice going soft. I'm asking if you want to make it real. Choose me. Not because you need security, but because you want to. She thought about the past month, the fights and fear and moments when she'd been certain they were both going to break. Thought about the man he was becoming, still scarred, still damaged, but trying. Actually trying. Yes, she said simply. I choose you. They had a second ceremony 2 months later, in spring when the snow finally melted. The whole pack attended, plus delegations from every allied territory. This time there were flowers and music and vows that meant something beyond legal contracts. When Ronan kissed her at the end, the crowd erupted in cheers. Calla laughed against his mouth, feeling lighter than she had in years. Iris was there too, still recovering but stronger every day. She decided to stay at Blackthorn Lodge, working with Margot in the kitchens. Some nights, Calla would find her standing outside the sealed tunnel entrance, one hand pressed to the rock, like she was saying goodbye to the darkness that had held her. You doing okay? Calla asked one evening. Getting there. It's strange being alive when I spent so long thinking I'd die down there. Iris turned to face her. But I'm glad you found me. Glad you were stubborn enough to go looking when everyone else had stopped. I learned from the best. Calla glanced back toward the lodge where Ronan was arguing with Finn about supply routes, actually smiling while he did it. He taught me that being broken doesn't mean you're finished. Sometimes it just means you're ready to rebuild differently. He's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other. The first year passed, then the second. Iron Wolf Ridge grew stronger with each season. Families moved in, drawn by the pack's new reputation for fairness and strength. The trading post Calla had inherited from her father became a hub for frontier commerce, with Daniel and Marcus running it under her guidance. The tunnels were cleared and properly reinforced, transformed from a tomb into functional mining operations that generated real income. Ronan oversaw the work personally, facing his demons head-on instead of avoiding them. He still had hard days, moments when the weight of the past pressed too heavy, but he'd learned to share that weight instead of carrying it alone. Calla had her own struggles. Nightmares about drowning in dark water. Panic attacks when she felt too confined. The legacy of trauma didn't disappear just because the situation improved, but they faced it together, built something stronger than either of them could have managed alone. 3 years after Calla first arrived at Blackthorn Lodge, a wildfire swept through the Eastern Territories. Ronan organized a massive rescue effort, leading pack members from 3 different settlements in fighting the blaze and evacuating families caught in the flames. They saved over 100 people, lost only 2 buildings. The Territorial Council gathered afterward to formally recognize the achievement. Alphas from across Montana Territory filled the hall, all watching as the council head prepared to honor Ronan for his leadership. But Ronan stood and shook his head. "The recognition belongs to someone else," he said clearly. "My wife, Calla, is the one who designed the evacuation routes and supply systems that made the rescue possible. She's the one who negotiated the alliances between packs that let us coordinate effectively. Without her work, dozens would have died." He turned to where Calla sat, stunned. "She took a broken man and a failing pack and showed us both how to be better. The real alpha of Iron Wolf Ridge isn't me. It's her." The hall went silent. Then Finn stood. "He's right. Calla Vexley deserves this recognition more than anyone." One by one, the other alphas stood too, acknowledging her, respecting her. Calla stood on shaking legs, moved to the front where Ronan waited. He took her hand, raised it high. "This is my partner," he announced to the gathered territories. "In all things, anyone who wants alliance with Iron Wolf Ridge deals with both of us." The hall erupted in approval. Later, back at Blackthorn Lodge, Calla stood on the wide porch watching the sun set over the valley. Ronan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Give away the recognition." "Yes, I did. Because it was true." He rested his chin on her shoulder. "You saved me, Calla. Not just from the guilt, but from the person I was becoming. Someone closed off and bitter and dead inside, even while still breathing. We saved each other." "Yeah." He turned her around to face him. "We did." They stood there as the light faded, 2 broken people who'd found a way to be whole together. Below them, the pack moved through evening routines, children playing, adults talking, life continuing in all its messy, beautiful complexity. "Do you ever regret it?" Ronan asked. "Agreeing to that first bargain? You could have found another way to save your brothers." Calla thought about it. About the scared, desperate woman who'd walked into a boarding house room looking for a monster and found a man instead. "No, not even on the hard days. This is where I was supposed to end up. Even though I'm still a mess? Especially because of that." She smiled. "Perfect is boring. I'll take real and complicated any day." "Good." He kissed her forehead. "Because you're stuck with me now." "Fortunately, I like being stuck." They went inside together as night fell. The lodge was warm and full of voices, transformed from the tomb it had been into something living, something that would last. Years later, when traders passing through asked about Iron Wolf Ridge, they'd hear stories. About the alpha who conquered his demons, about the woman who refused to let him drown, about a pack that rose from tragedy to become the strongest on the frontier. But those were just stories. The truth was simpler and more complex all at once. 2 people had been desperate enough to make a bargain, broken enough to understand each other, stubborn enough to fight for something better. And in the harshest wilderness imaginable, in a place built on grief and mistakes and the weight of the past, they'd found what fear never could have given them. Hope, trust, home. The kind of love that didn't fix everything but made the brokenness bearable, made the hard days worth surviving, made the future something to build instead of something to fear. Calla Vexley stood in the main hall of Blackthorn Lodge one evening, 5 years after first arriving. Around her, the pack celebrated another successful harvest. Children ran between tables. Adults laughed and argued and lived. Ronan caught her eye from across the room and smiled. Not the careful, guarded expression he'd worn when they first met, but something open and real. She smiled back, feeling the weight of what they'd built together. Not perfect. Never perfect. But theirs. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Ronan didn't move for a long time, just knelt there in the snow, staring at Iris like she was a ghost made flesh. Calla pushed herself up on shaking arms, every muscle screaming. "We need to get her inside. She's been down there for 5 years. She needs medical attention." That broke through. Ronan surged forward, scooped Iris up like she weighed nothing. The woman made a small sound of protest, but she was too weak to fight. Her eyes kept closing, then snapping open like she was afraid the daylight would disappear. "Finn!" Ronan's voice cracked across the valley. "Finn, get Margot, now!" The pack appeared from everywhere at once. They must have been searching, must have heard the collapse. Finn took one look at Iris and went white. "That's impossible," he breathed. "Nothing's impossible." Ronan was already moving toward the lodge. "Get the healer, get blankets, get whatever she needs." Calla tried to stand and her legs gave out. Cole caught her before she hit the ground. "Easy," he said. "You're half frozen yourself." "I'm fine. Help Iris." "We've got her. You nearly died down there too." The next few hours blurred together. Warm water, dry clothes, Margot forcing hot broth down her throat while lecturing about stupidity and risks. Calla let it wash over her, too exhausted to argue. When she finally made it to the room where they'd taken Iris, she found Ronan sitting beside the bed, holding the woman's hand like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. The healer, Thomas, was checking Iris's vitals, his face grim. "She needs time, weeks, maybe months to recover properly. Her body's forgotten how to process real food. Her eyes need to relearn light, and her mind—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Whatever she needs," Ronan said. "Whatever it costs." Thomas nodded and left. Calla moved to stand in the doorway, not sure if she should intrude. Ronan saw her. "She told me, before she passed out. Said she was looking for Adrian when the second collapse hit. Got trapped in an air pocket." His voice cracked. "Adrian died saving others, and I sealed her in there for 5 years because I was too broken to check properly." Calla came into the room, sat in the chair on the other side of the bed. "You didn't know." "I should have." He looked down at Iris's sleeping face. "Adrian would have wanted me to save her, and I failed him twice. Once when he died, and again when I buried her alive." "Stop." Calla's voice was sharper than she intended. "You made the best decision you could with what you knew. The tunnels were unstable. You'd already lost your brother. You were trying to prevent more deaths. And instead, one person survived against impossible odds, and you get a chance to make it right." She leaned forward. "Don't waste that chance drowning in guilt. Use it to actually change things." Ronan was quiet for a long time. Then, "You almost died today, because I ran instead of facing this. I made my own choice. Why?" He looked at her finally, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes made her chest tight. "Why risk your life for this? For me?" Calla opened her mouth, closed it. She didn't have a good answer. Or rather, she had one that terrified her too much to say out loud. "Because someone had to," she said instead. "And it wasn't going to be you." He almost smiled. "You're the most stubborn person I've ever met." "Good. You needed stubborn." Iris woke up 3 days later, her eyes struggling to focus in the dim lamplight. Calla was reading aloud when it happened, keeping vigil while Ronan handled the flood of messages from other territories demanding to know what had happened. "Where?" Iris's voice was barely a whisper. "Blackthorn Lodge. You're safe." Calla set the book aside, moved closer. "Do you remember getting out?" Confusion clouded Iris's face, then clarity, then horror. "Adrian, I need to see Adrian." Calla's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. He didn't make it." "No." Iris tried to sit up, too weak to manage it. "No, I saw him. He was holding up the supports so others could escape. I tried to get to him, but the ceiling—" She stopped, tears leaking from her eyes. "He saved at least 4 people before it came down. He died a hero. He died because he was too damn stubborn to save himself." Iris's hands twisted in the blanket. Just like Ronan, they were so alike, always putting everyone else first, even when it killed them. The door opened. Ronan stood there, looking uncertain in a way Calla had never seen. Iris saw him and made a broken sound. "You're alive. I thought, down there in the dark, I kept having nightmares that you died trying to save me." "I I tried. Ronan moved to the bedside, knelt so he was at her level. I searched the tunnels 3 times. I couldn't find you. You had no reason to look for me. I wasn't even supposed to be in the tunnels. Iris reached out with a shaking hand, touched his scarred face. Adrian's last words were about you. He said, "Tell Ronan it wasn't his fault. Tell him I chose this." Ronan's composure shattered. He pressed his forehead to the edge of the bed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Calla looked away, giving him what privacy she could. He knew the supports were failing, Iris continued softly. Knew he probably wouldn't make it out, but he stayed because that's who he was. And he'd be furious if he knew you spent 5 years destroying yourself over his choice. They sat in grief-heavy silence. Finally, Iris looked at Calla. You're the one who found me. Yes. Why? You don't know me. Don't owe me anything. Calla glanced at Ronan. Because someone I care about needed a different ending to this story. Understanding flickered across Iris's exhausted face. Oh, I see. A pause. Good. He deserves someone who fights for him. Hold on to that. Don't make my mistake and waste time you could have together. The words hit harder than they should have. Over the next 2 weeks, everything changed. Ronan stood before the pack and told them the truth, all of it. About his failure to search properly, about Calla finding Iris alive, about the changes that needed to happen. I let fear control my decisions, he said, voice steady despite the weight of every eye on him. Let grief blind me to what the pack needed. That ends now. The tunnels will be properly searched and cleared, the trade routes reopen, and I stop hiding from leadership. The pack was silent. Then Finn stood. About damn time, he said roughly, and the tension broke. One by one, the others stood too, supporting him. Ready to move forward, Calla watched from the back, throat tight with something she couldn't name. Search teams went into the tunnels with proper equipment and safety protocols. They recovered 6 more bodies, including Adrian's. The funeral was held on a hillside overlooking the valley. The whole pack gathered in the spring sun. Ronan spoke words over his brother's grave that he should have said years ago, about sacrifice and love and the kind of bravery that put others first. When he finished, he looked lighter, like he'd finally set down a weight he'd carried too long. The trade routes reopened within a month. Merchants flowed through Iron Wolf Ridge again, bringing revenue and connections to the outside world. Finn negotiated new treaties using Calla's research, strengthening alliances that had been neglected. Calla found herself pulled into territorial politics in ways she'd never expected. Other alphas had heard about the woman who'd survived flooded tunnels, who'd convinced the most stubborn man on the frontier to change. When she spoke at council meetings, people listened. You're good at this, Ronan told her after a particularly successful negotiation. Better than I ever was. You're good at the vision. I'm good at the details. She squeezed his hand. We work better together. Is that your way of saying you want to make this partnership real? Not just on paper? Her heart jumped. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm saying the first marriage was survival. A bargain. He pulled her close, voice going soft. I'm asking if you want to choose me now. Not because you need to, but because you want to. Calla thought about the past months, the fear and fights and moments when everything could have fallen apart. Thought about the man he was becoming, still scarred, still carrying damage, but trying, actually trying. Yes, Issy, she said. I choose you. They had a second ceremony in late spring, when wildflowers covered the valley. The whole pack attended, plus delegations from allied territories. This time there were vows that meant something beyond contracts. When Ronan kissed her at the end, the crowd erupted. Calla laughed against his mouth, feeling something close to joy. But the real test came in summer, when fire swept through the eastern territories. Calla was in the archive room when the messenger arrived, hoarse, lathered with sweat. Wildfire, he gasped, started in the dry timber beyond Split Creek. Winds pushing it toward 3 settlements. They're evacuating, but the roads are blocked. Ronan was in the main hall within minutes, already giving orders. How many people trapped? Maybe 100, mostly families with children. The fire's moving fast. Then we move faster. Ronan turned to Finn. Gather every able body. We leave in 10 minutes. The risk? Finn started. I know the risk. We're going anyway. Ronan's voice carried that old alpha command, but tempered now with something steadier. 10 minutes. Move. The pack mobilized like a military unit. Within the hour, they were riding hard toward the fire, joined by volunteers from 2 neighboring territories. Calla rode with them despite Ronan's protests, bringing medical supplies and evacuation plans she'd sketched out during the ride. They reached the first settlement just as the fire crested the ridge. Smoke turned the sky orange. Heat beat against exposed skin like a physical force. 3 routes out, Calla said, spreading her map. North is blocked by the fire. South leads through canyon that'll trap people if the wind shifts. West goes through Iron Wolf Ridge territory, longest route but safest. West it is. Ronan started organizing teams. Cole, James, take 20 people and start clearing the western road. Finn, coordinate the evacuation. Get the families out first. Margot, set up a triage station at the halfway point. They worked through the afternoon and into evening, moving families ahead of the flames. The fire was relentless, jumping roads and consuming everything in its path. Twice they had to abandon sections of the route and find alternate paths. Once, a shift in wind nearly cut off their escape entirely, but Ronan held everything together with calm authority, making decisions without second-guessing himself. And when the decisions were too complex, he turned to Calla. 3 families still trapped in a cabin past the ridge, someone reported. Fires surrounding it, no clear route in or out. Calla studied the map, calculating angles and wind patterns. There, old mining road from Iron Wolf Ridge. Hasn't been used in years, but it should still be passable. Comes out behind the cabin. That road goes through unstable ground, Finn warned. I know. She met Ronan's eyes. But it's the only option. He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. We use it. Calla, you guide us. You know those old maps better than anyone. They took the mining road at a hard gallop, smoke choking the air. The path was treacherous, half collapsed in places, overgrown in others. But Calla's memory of the archive maps held true. They reached the cabin just as the fire engulfed the main road. Getting the families out was chaos. Children crying, adults panicking, flames roaring close enough to singe hair. But the pack worked together with practiced efficiency, loading people onto horses and sending them back along the mining road while others fought to slow the fire's advance. The last family was barely clear when the cabin's roof collapsed in a shower of sparks. They made it back to the evacuation point as full dark fell. Over 100 people huddled there, tired, scared, but alive. Every single one. The Territorial Council convened 2 weeks later to formally recognize the rescue. Alphas from across Montana Territory filled the Great Hall in Helena, all watching as the council head prepared to honor Ronan for his leadership. But Ronan stood and shook his head. The recognition belongs to someone else, he said clearly. My wife, Calla, designed the evacuation routes that saved those families. She negotiated the alliances that let 3 packs coordinate effectively. She found the path through the mining road when every other option was blocked. He turned to where Calla sat, stunned. Without her work, dozens would have died. She's the real leader of Iron Wolf Ridge. The hall went absolutely silent. Then Finn stood. He's right. Calla Vexley deserves this honor more than anyone here. One by one, the other alphas rose, acknowledging her, respecting her. Calla stood on shaking legs, moved to the front. Ronan took her hand, raised it high. This is my partner, he announced, in all things. Anyone who wants alliance with Iron Wolf Ridge deals with both of us. The hall erupted in approval. Later, back at Blackthorn Lodge, Calla stood on the wide porch watching sunset paint the valley gold. Ronan came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Give away the recognition. Yes, I did, because it was true. He rested his chin on her shoulder. You saved me, Calla. Not just from the guilt, but from becoming someone dead inside while still breathing. We saved each other. Yeah. He turned her to face him. We did. They stood there as light faded, 2 broken people who'd found a way to be whole together. Below, the pack moved through evening routines, children playing, adults talking, life continuing. "Do you ever regret it?" Ronan asked. "That first bargain? You could have found another way." Calla thought about the scared woman who'd walked into a boarding house looking for a monster and found a man instead. "No, not even on the hard days. This is where I belonged. Even though I'm still a mess, especially because of that." She smiled. "Perfect is boring. I'll take real any day." Time passed. A year, then 2, then 5. Iron Wolf Ridge grew stronger with each season. Families migrated there for safety and opportunity. The trading post that had once been Calla's desperate inheritance became a hub for frontier commerce, with Daniel and Marcus running it under her guidance. The tunnels were properly reinforced and reopened as functional mining operations. Ronan oversaw the work personally, facing his demons instead of running from them. Iris recovered slowly but steadily. She stayed at Blackthorn Lodge, working with Margot in the kitchens. Some evenings, Calla would find her outside the old tunnel entrance, one hand pressed to the rock like she was saying goodbye to the darkness. "You doing okay?" Calla asked one such evening. "Getting there. Strange being alive when I thought I'd die down there." Iris turned to face her. "But I'm glad you were stubborn enough to look when everyone else had stopped." "I learned from the best." Calla glanced back toward the lodge where Ronan was arguing with Finn about supply routes, actually smiling while he did it. "He taught me that being broken doesn't mean you're finished. Sometimes it means you're ready to rebuild. He's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other." Ronan still had hard days, moments when the past pressed too heavy, but he'd learned to share that weight instead of carrying it alone. Calla had her own struggles, nightmares about drowning, panic in confined spaces. Trauma didn't disappear just because circumstances improved, but they faced it together, built something stronger than either could have managed alone. 3 years after the wildfire rescue, Daniel rode up to Blackthorn Lodge with news. The syndicate that held Father's debt, they're expanding operations, buying up every failed claim between here and the border. Calla looked up from the ledger she was reviewing. How aggressive. Very. They're forcing people out, taking land for pennies on the dollar. Daniel's jaw was tight. Same thing they tried with us. Not anymore. Calla stood, mind already working. Gather the affected landowners. We're calling a territorial meeting. The meeting happened 2 weeks later. 23 families facing foreclosure, all desperate. The syndicate representative, a slick man named Morrison, sat at the head table looking smug. "The contracts are legal," he said smoothly. "These people borrowed money they couldn't repay. The land is rightfully ours." "The contracts are predatory," Calla countered. "Interest rates 3 times the territorial standard. Payment terms designed to guarantee failure. Business is business." "This isn't business. It's theft dressed in paperwork." She stood, addressing the room. "Here's what we do. Iron Wolf Ridge will buy out every single one of these contracts at fair market value. The families keep their land. You get your money." Morrison's smile faltered. That would cost—" "I know exactly what it costs. We can afford it." She leaned forward. "Here's what you can't afford. Having every alpha in Montana territory know you tried to steal from their people. We're offering you a way out. Take it." The room erupted. Morrison tried to argue, but the math was against him. Calla had done her research, knew exactly how much the syndicate had paid for the original debts versus what they stood to gain from seizing land. In the end, he took the deal. Had to. Afterward, one of the landowners, an older woman named Clara, approached Calla with tears in her eyes. "You just saved my family's ranch. 3 generations on that land. How can I ever repay you?" "You don't." Calla squeezed her hand. "You stay. You build. You help the next person who's drowning. That's how this works." Word spread. The woman who'd started as a desperate bride bought to clear debt was now the power behind Iron Wolf Ridge's rise. The strategist who'd saved 100 people from fire and 24 families from foreclosure. But she never forgot where she'd come from, the fear and desperation that had driven her to that first bargain. Years passed. Children filled halls, once echoing with silence. The pack grew to over 60 strong. Iron Wolf Ridge became known as the fairest, strongest settlement in the territory. One spring evening, 5 years after Calla first arrived, She stood in the main hall watching the pack celebrate another successful season. Around her, people laughed and argued and lived. Her brothers were there, Daniel courting Sarah from the gardens, Marcus arguing politics with Finn. Ronan caught her eye from across the room and smiled. Not the careful, guarded expression from when they'd first met, but something open and real. She smiled back, feeling the weight of everything they'd built. Not perfect, never perfect, but theirs. Iris appeared beside her, carrying 2 cups of wine. Thinking deep thoughts? Just grateful. Calla accepted the cup. For all of this. For being alive to see it. We both got second chances. Iris clinked her cup against Calla's. Not many people get that. We're lucky. Yeah, we are. Later, when the celebration wound down and people drifted off to bed, Calla and Ronan walked out to the hillside where Adrian was buried. The view stretched for miles, valley and mountains and endless sky. You did good today, Ronan said quietly. With the syndicate. Adrian would have loved seeing you take them apart with math and contracts. He would have liked the dramatic speech better. I got that from watching you. Ronan laughed, warm and genuine. Fair point. He pulled her close, both of them looking out at the territory they'd saved together. You know what the hardest part was? After the collapse? What? Believing I deserved a future. That I could build something good instead of just surviving my mistakes. He kissed the top of her head. You showed me different. Showed me broken doesn't mean finished. You showed me the same thing. Calla leaned into him. We're quite a pair. The best kind of mess. They stood there as stars came out, 2 people who'd found each other in desperation and chosen to stay through everything after. The frontier was still harsh. Life was still hard. But they had this, a place they'd built, a pack they'd saved, a future they'd fought for. And each other. Always each other. Come on, Calla said eventually. Let's go home. Home. Ronan tested the word, smiled. Yeah, let's do that. They walked back to Blackthorn Lodge hand in hand, past gardens and workshops and the sealed tunnel entrance where the past was finally, truly buried. Inside, lamplight glowed warm. Their pack, their family, their life. Calla Vexley, who'd started as a desperate woman with no choices, looked at everything she'd become and felt something close to peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because she'd learned the most important truth. You didn't need to be unbroken to build something beautiful. You just needed to be brave enough to try, and stubborn enough to keep going when it got hard. She'd been both. They both had. And in the harshest wilderness imaginable, they'd built something that would last. Not a fairy tale, just a life. The best kind there was.